Good day. I have taken note of some of the misinformation and mischief being shared in the public domain by members of the opposition. Let me first express my extreme disappointment in the utterances attributed to Mr. Colm Imbert as it relates to the recent rating by Standard & Poor's. Mr. Imbert knows better, and that is why his deliberate obfuscation is so troubling. Even though he caused the mess that we are in today, he seeks to mislead the nation and engage in political theatrics rather than seek redemption by being truthful. It is reprehensible for Imbert to have deliberately attempted to use his public office to try to mislead the country, to try and score cheap political points. Now, even though he has lost all credibility with the nation, I believe it is my duty, bound by my oath of office, to correct the mischief and to set the record straight once and for all. Firstly, it is ludicrous for Mr. Imbert to simultaneously claim that the rating is because of the PNM's work, while at the same time blaming the UNC for it. It is either one or the other, and the evidence is clear. The recent shift in the outlook from stable to negative is a continuation of the PNM legacy of downgrade and failure. Ironically, Imbert admitted that the rating was based on information up to April 2025. The UNC government was sworn into office in May 2025. In which world is April after May? So if the ratings are based on the data collected up to April 2025 when the PNM were in office, obviously this is a PNM rating. When the PNM assumed office in 2015, Trinidad and Tobago had an A-grade rating left by the UNC. Under Imbert's leadership, S&P downgraded this country's rating or outlook 7 times in the last 9 years of the PNM, and that is not counting the current change in the outlook. In fact, the very first line of the Standard & Poor's report for 2025 states, and I quote, "Trinidad and Tobago's fiscal and external buffers have eroded gradually over many years, reflecting limited effectiveness of policies to boost GDP growth and strengthen fiscal management." End quote. Over many years. That is basic English. The report continues. Despite many efforts, there has only been limited progress in diversifying the economy, leaving it vulnerable to volatile energy prices, while the output from oil and gas sectors have recently declined. End of quote. This is not UNC performance, ladies and gentlemen. This is all PNM. This rating result has been as a direct result of the PNM's policies over the last decade. In fact, what the S&P report said on page 2 is, and I quote, "Failure to address a prolonged weakening of public finances and diminution of foreign exchange reserves could reflect institutional shortcomings that limit the government's capacity to build buffers that enhance the country's ability to respond to negative shocks." End quote. Prolonged weaknesses. That is not the UNC. That is a direct result of the PNM policies over the past decade that has resulted in these prolonged challenges that Standard & Poor's refers to. It is the very failure of Imbert that resulted in this dangerous financial situation that the country is in today. But Imbert didn't stop there. Anxious to deflect blame for his own actions, he claimed that the increase in expenditure at the mid-year contributed to S&P's decision. The entire country knows that when the UNC assumed office, it was in the middle of the financial year, and it was faced with billions in unpaid bills. Imbert and the PNM went on a spending spree, racking up billions in debt without making the arrangements to meet their financial obligations. They shared contracts to family, friends, and financiers, ordered goods and services, took loans, made promises, but did not budget a cent towards payment of these bills. That was a dereliction of fiduciary duty by the PNM, spearheaded by Imbert. It was my government that took the responsible decision to meet those obligations. We had to find the money to make these payments, and we did. Standard & Poor's also goes on to state, and I quote again, we could revise the outlook to stable over the next 24 months if we believe government policies will improve fiscal sustainability and lead to more favorable long-term GDP growth prospects and sustain the country's external profile. What the S&P report in summary states is that the country is being downgraded because of the past policies of the PNM. It is essentially reaffirming what we have been telling the PNM and the country over the last decade, that they need to stop and refocus, introduce measures to stimulate the economy, develop the SME sector, create an investment climate for direct foreign investment, increase national output, and boost foreign exchange generation. We have been saying this for years. But where the PNM failed, we will succeed, as the S&P recommendations already form part of our plans and policies. In anticipation of these changes, the S&P report also predicts continuous real GDP growth, increased real investment growth, real exports growth, increased foreign exchange share of residents' bank deposits, and more. Why didn't Imbert speak about that instead of twisting the contents of the report? Did he even read the report? This is exactly the kind of political hypocrisy and information necromancy that the country rejected in April 2025. Just to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, unlike Imbert, this Minister of Finance is guided by the UNC Manifesto, a responsible Prime Minister, the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and a crystal clear mandate to serve the people of this country. Imbert also reportedly spoke of the dragon gas deal being stopped, etc. Given that this comment came after the Honorable Prime Minister had already publicly announced that she had met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and that the U.S. had already agreed to work with this government towards provision of the OFAC license, paving the way for the resurrection of potential oil and gas arrangements with Venezuela. Did Imbert not read the papers? Or is it that he thought that citizens were not keeping abreast of our Prime Minister's achievements? Imbert should be hanging his head in shame instead of trying to fool the population. Maybe it is this tendency towards cheap political tricks that caused him to be fired as Minister of Finance by his Prime Minister. Trinidad and Tobago has already rejected this kind of juvenile conmanship. On behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, I want to tell Imbert and the whole PNM to stop their divisive rhetoric, lies, and unpatriotic conduct. This country deserves better. As citizens, we should all be anxious to see this country prosper. We should all contribute to the efforts to move forward. I have a message for Imbert and his clan. It is not too late to get on board. It is not too late to choose to work as mature representatives of the people in the national interest. Join us as we build this country, or shut up and stand aside and stop trying to sabotage our country's progress. Before you is the road to make our country better than it is now. Get on it or get left behind.